Louis van Gaal's army! Louis van Gaal's army!
Is that how highly you rate the performance, yeah?
Yeah, you don't?
No, I'm just interested in what how you see it.
Okay. That's good. That you are interested.
The endless spiral of Manchester United in the mid-2000s has been studied by history's most prominent minds. The theatre of dreams, once an empire of unshakable glory, had faltered. Silly season was in full swing. In the midst of the descent, in need of direction, the club set their eyes on a potential saviour. A man who Wayne Rooney would later go on to claim was the best manager he had ever worked with, Louis van Gaal. One of the most outspoken, unorthodox, and pragmatic managers of his generation. A quote machine, a stern disciplinarian, a master at alienating his audience and his players, and above all else, a serial winner. One of the most intentionally yet unintentionally funny men in the entire football industry. Van Gaal's Manchester United tenure was a lot of things, all of which we'll get into, but honestly, it's a period that I personally look back on far more favourably than I thought I would. Which is why we're going deep today to answer an important question. How good was Louis van Gaal's Red Army? David Moyes' 10-month reign was defined by shattered records, undesirable records, and a squad bereft of direction. Having replaced Ferguson's trusted backroom staff with his own, Moyes struggled to win the dressing room's faith. The aura of invincibility had evaporated. Old Trafford was no longer a fortress, but a target. When Moyes was sacked in April 2014, with the club languishing outside of the European spots, it felt like, the final act of a Greek tragedy. I've covered it in detail previously here, so we're not going to get into it in this video. Drama had befallen a club that was anything but used to this level of mediocrity. Children had been born, led successful and happy lives, even had their own children in that time frame, and now all that was good was taken from them. I'm not being dramatic, stop laughing. It was time to move on. It's what Rio Ferdinand, Nemanja Vidic, Patrice Evra, Darren Fletcher, Anderson, Danny Welbeck, and Shinji Kagawa did. Worst of all, it's what Bebe did. Bebe and Jemba Jemba, the streets will never forget. The most common assessment of Moyes' appointment was that this was a manager that had never truly guided an elite football club to success. In fact, with Everton the season before he arrived at Old Trafford, he finished in 6th place with 63 points. His Manchester United side finished in 7th with 64. The difference, as you can see, is negligible. What United really needed, yes, what they really needed, was a manager with elite credentials and the pedigree to match. Someone with European silverware already to their name. Someone who is absolutely no nonsense and who demands nothing but respect. Who they needed was a manager with a resume as towering as his own self-belief. Congratulations on signing the best coach in the world. The words of Louis van Gaal when he signed his first contract with Ajax. Mind you, he was only 39 years old and this was his first professional coaching job. It's what you call bravado. At the same time, it's hard to argue with the assessment of a man that would go on to win the European Cup with the youngest lineup to ever lift the trophy. That's 24 years old on average. Louis van Gaal wasn't just another manager. He was a personality, an ideologue. He was an Ajax player at one point, however this was during the Cruyff era and he simply wasn't good enough for the first team. One article I came across even claimed he was described as a slug on sandpaper in his playing days, which isn't exactly complimentary. Nonetheless, he did have a long career as a player, playing over 250 matches with Sparta Rotterdam. At one point, while he was doing so, he would work as a PE teacher, coaching school kids in the morning, training with his club in the afternoon, and studying for his coaching badges in the evening. It's believed that he drove almost 200 miles per day between his home, the school he was teaching at, and Rotterdam's training facilities for several years. This kind of individual is rare. The determination, the grit, the will to succeed. He only received this nickname many years later, but there is a reason he is known as the Iron Tulip. In 1991, after apprenticing as an assistant, he took charge of Ajax and immediately stamped his authority. in his very first season, the club triumphed in the UEFA Cup, foreshadowing greater glories to come. Van Gaal's greatest strength was and is talent development. Under his tutelage, a 16-year-old Clarence Seedorf debuted. Patrick Kluivert scored the winner in the 1995 European Cup final at 18. Edgar Davids, Mark Overmars, Michael Reiziger, the De Boer twins, the list goes on. At Barcelona, Xavi Hernandez, Carles Puyol, Victor Valdez, and Andres Iniesta were all given first-team starts by him. At Bayern Munich, David Alaba, Holger Badstuber, and Thomas Müller all got their chances and thrived under him. Adding on to that, Bastian Schweinsteiger, who was already a first-team player, was repurposed from the wing to the defensive midfield position. Not a common transition, but one that defined his career and led to him being one of the greatest of all time in that spot. You can't take all the credit for what these players achieved in their careers, but there is a clear pattern here and a common root. At Ajax, the young manager with intense glare had become a legend in Amsterdam, and his philosophy, a word I'd like you all to get comfortable with hearing, was born. A philosophy of pragmatic yet proactive tactics, youth empowerment, hard work, and absolute conviction in his methods. He then went to Barcelona, back-to-back La Liga titles immediately upon his arrival, including a league and cup double in 1998. But this is where the fiery personality began to go global, and everyone knew what kind of man we were dealing with. He regularly fell out with local media and certain stars. Most notoriously, he fell out with Brazilian playmaker Rivaldo, a man who won the Ballon d'Or as a Van Gaal player, by the way. Rivaldo wanted to play a more free role. Van Gaal insisted on team structure, even pushing him out to the wide left. The feud made headlines, which brings us to the biggest criticism that has historically been laid on Van Gaal by purists of the beautiful game. Johan Cruyff, who was the Barcelona manager just over a year before Van Gaal was, and many other high-profile figures have been vocal about this in the past. He does not care for independence, it's all about the team. Dennis Bergkamp spoke about this in his 2013 autobiography, Stillness and Speed. Louis is didactic. He gives his players instructions to make the system work, and the system is sacred. All players are equal to Van Gaal. Big names do not exist for him, and everyone is subordinate to the team and the system, his system. Cruyff, being a great player, encouraged individualists because they can decide matches. For context, Bergkamp was coached by both Cruyff and Van Gaal at Ajax. Bear in mind, Bergkamp flourished in both systems, but it's interesting insight. Taking things back to Catalonia, under mounting criticism, despite trophies, Van Gaal resigned from Barcelona in 2000, famously telling reporters, "Friends of the press, I am leaving. Congratulations." And those same individuals that were overly critical of him proceeded to eat very well over the next near decade. The Netherlands, Barcelona again, and then Ajax again as technical director, all unsuccessful. The whispers were getting louder. Van Gaal was finished at the top. AZ Alkmaar in 2005, a step down in the eyes of some, but it was exactly what was needed. At Alkmaar, Van Gaal rediscovered his mojo, and by 2009, he delivered the Eredivisie title for only the second time in their history. He was back. This move earned Van Gaal another shot at an elite club, Bayern Munich. In 2 years, he won everything there is to win in Germany and fell just shy of a Champions League trophy thanks to Jose Mourinho's Inter Milan. But again, it was off the pitch where the real action was. One of the most interesting tales came after dropping Luca Toni from the squad. Van Gaal reportedly walked into the dressing room, dropped his pants, and shouted, "I have bigger balls than all of you." A stunned silence followed. Some players laughed later on. Luca Toni himself confirmed the story, as have many others who were present that day, such as Mark van Bommel, who famously hates Van Gaal. But that was Van Gaal. Boisterous, loud, but often effective. After being let go by Bayern Munich, he redeemed his Netherlands failure by being reappointed and taking the team to the semi-finals of the 2014 World Cup, only just losing out to Argentina on penalties. Now in his early 60s, some might have thought retirement was on the horizon. This was not the case. Instead, he went the opposite direction. He decided to go for possibly the hottest hot seat in all of Europe at the time, a once undeniable giant in freefall. Fun fact, when Sir Alex Ferguson first touted the idea of retirement in 2002, it's believed that Van Gaal was the #1 candidate for the job, as he'd already been told it was his by Manchester United's CEO at the time, Peter Kenyon. Ferguson, however, decided to stay. 12 years later, the landscape had flipped on its head.
When you see my career, you can see what I have won, and the future shall show if I can do that again.
Louis van Gaal's first season at Manchester United began under a blazing spotlight. In an attempt to overcorrect the errors of Moyes' introduction, the club backed him heavily in the transfer market. Chief among the purchases, Argentine winger Angel Di Maria signed for a British record just under £60 million. He's given the number 7. The signing came off the heels of a man-of-the-match performance in the Champions League final, La Decima for Real Madrid. The man who presented Di Maria with the award? Sir Alex Ferguson. To this day, this departure provokes head-scratching. Di Maria immediately admitted he never wanted to leave Madrid in an open letter to the Madrid fans, but United, they probably couldn't care less about the details. He was theirs. He was about to carry on the tradition of incredible number 7s. I just knew it. Under Herrera, Luke Shaw, Daley Blind, Marcos Rojo, and superstar striker Radamel Falcao followed. It was a statement of intent. Manchester United intended to restore the natural order, and Van Gaal was entrusted with the rebuild. Now, Van Gaal seemingly never stopped with the experimentation, as he tried a lot of different formations and shapes. 3-5-2, 3-1-4-2, 4-1-4-1, 4-4-2 diamonds, 4-3-3s, nothing seemed to stick, and the rotation was somewhat similar. Hope levels were skyrocketing, but reality hit like cold rain. A loss at home to Swansea on day 1. New manager bounce failed to register. A loss 4-0 to League One MK Dons was mixed in there somewhere. Will Griggs on fire, Dele Alli was present. By October, United languished mid-table, but the Dutch manager maintained his philosophy took time to kick in. Yet, amid the bumps, there were signs of progress. Van Gaal slowly instilled his methods, a patient, possession-heavy style with an emphasis on teamwork and shape. The players began to adapt, and by winter of 2014, United did find some good rhythm and went on a 10-match unbeaten run. Inside the camp, all seemed well. Angel Di Maria looked every bit of the superstar signing that we were promised. He lit up the league in September with a stunning goal, a delicate chip at Leicester that had commentators going wild. Leicester, won the game 5-3, but we don't dwell on that, okay? So forget about it. Di Maria was given freedom to roam from midfield, even winning United's Player of the Month twice by autumn. 12 games in, 3 goals and 6 assists. This was gonna be good. The team spearheaded by Di Maria's creativity, Wayne Rooney's leadership, and a rejuvenated Marouane Fellaini, who Van Gaal used quite cleverly as an attacking player, as nature intended, began climbing the table. By March 2015, United hit their best form. 3-0 to Tottenham Hotspur, 2-1 to Liverpool at Anfield, a game famously referred to as Juan Field, thanks to 2 lovely goals by Juan Mata. The game is also infamously known for Steven Gerrard getting sent off 38 seconds after coming on. Here is Buddy's heat map. It's iconic. Manchester City went down 4-2 at Old Trafford. United were now in 3rd place, only 8 points off the top after about 30 games. Obviously, the title was out of reach as Chelsea maintained control, but the progress was clear. The philosophy was undeniably sinking in, but that wasn't to last. Going back a step, in late January 2015, Di Maria's home was attacked by burglars, while he and his young family were inside eating dinner. Though an alarm scared off the intruders, the incident deeply unsettled Di Maria. Within days, he relocated his family to a hotel under 24-hour surveillance. On the pitch, his form dipped sharply as injuries and Van Gaal shifting him all over the place took its toll. The once brilliant Di Maria began to struggle. Van Gaal tried to protect him, giving him sporadic starts and public votes of confidence, but the spark was gone. By the second half of the year, Di Maria was often on the bench, and rumors that he was unhappy up north became rife. Years later, his wife still reminisces on the good times she had in Manchester. There we were, in England, a shithole. You're walking down the street and you don't know if they're going to kill you or what. The food's disgusting. I was saying, love, I want to kill myself. It's 2 in the afternoon and it's already dark. Generational hate. Now, this episode was somewhat emblematic of Van Gaal's mixed results in recruitment at United. For every success, say Herrera's solid integration and formation into a folk hero, or Blind's reliability, there was a disappointment. Falcao's loan yielded few goals, and he was also missing a kneecap. Nonetheless, the 2014-15 season was ultimately good enough to inspire confidence going forward.
Now the fans are shouting every week, Louis van Gaal's army!
So also the fans are very satisfied with Louis van Gaal.
United secured a return to the UEFA Champions League. It wasn't pretty, not many goals were scored, a 10-year low for that matter. But this is what a rebuild is all about. Plus, Van Gaal was providing enough entertainment to keep the British legacy media afloat. This is him dispelling accusations of his side only playing progressive long balls to a journalist in a press conference. The dude brought out some receipts like it was show and tell. He once told his team he was squeezing his ass late in close games. What he was trying to reference was squeaky bum time, a famous expression coined by Sir Alex Ferguson to reference the final moments in a game when you're on the edge of your seat. I feel like this goes without saying, but I'm gonna say it anyway just in case there are a few misconceptions. English is Louis van Gaal's, I don't know, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, maybe even 5th language. So these sort of things, they're bound to happen. They're indications of cultural differences and they're innocent, but the English press ate them up. All of this is to say the fans were on board, and that's because Van Gaal's second season promised a genuine title challenge. There were sadly many casualties. Van Persie, who did not gel with his compatriot as many had hoped, was out the door. Rafael, Javier Hernandez, Nani, Johnny Evans, all gone. After spending the summer claiming he was going to fight for his spot at Manchester United, Di Maria's wife got her wish, and the Di Marias were off to Paris for about £45 million. United splashed the cash again, this time targeting youth and potential. Dutch maestro Memphis Depay arrived, the new number 7. This one would be the one to break the curse. I could feel it. The man dubbed the next Thierry Henry burst onto the scene. Anthony Martial, the world's most expensive teenager at 36 million. I genuinely believe this man would solve all of my problems at one point, and all it took was one YouTube compilation and a clip of him playing in gloves. Morgan Schneiderlin and Bastian Schweinsteiger entered to strengthen the midfield. Oh yeah, we were cooking now. Now the season start was mixed. 2 wins, a draw, and a loss to start things off. Meh. But come September, the hype was reaching critical mass.
Oh yes! Welcome to Manchester United, Anthony Martial!
Sorry, I need a moment. By late September, Manchester United sat atop the Premier League table for the first time in the post-Ferguson era. Defense was looking so good that Van Gaal even forgot Chris Smalling's name in his euphoria.
Mr. Mike Smalling.
Chris, could I...
Oh, Chris, sorry.
Memphis showed flashes of brilliance, and Wayne Rooney broke the club's scoring record. But again, the goals didn't flow freely. The style of play remained methodical, cautious. It was just... okay, I'll be honest, it was boring. It was very boring. Manchester United became Side Pass FC, and the first cracks in the campaign appeared in Europe. United's return to the Champions League was short-lived. A faltering group stage saw them eliminated in December, and they failed to progress after a chaotic 2-3 loss to Wolfsburg. Van Gaal's cautious tactics away from home, and an untimely injury crisis, cost them dear. Everything fell apart in late 2015, December, a month from hell. United went winless through a series of very winnable matches, successive league defeats to newly promoted Bournemouth and lowly Norwich at Old Trafford. The football was lifeless, the confidence was gone, and by Christmas, the club had slipped from 1st to 5th, and the British press smelt blood in the water. Now by this point, almost everybody and their dog knew that Van Gaal's time was limited. With Jose Mourinho recently being sacked by Chelsea, it was all the more inevitable. Van Gaal has never been one to hide his emotions in the press, so despite this being such a high-pressure moment, nothing changed. He gave the press the sound bites that they wanted. Has anybody in this room not a feeling to apologize to me? Nobody has that feeling. That's what I'm wondering. I'd think I was already sacked. I have read I have been sacked. What do you think that means with my wife, or with my kids, or with my grandchildren, or with the fans of Manchester United, or my friends? Do you think that I want to talk with the media now? I'm here only because of the Premier League rules. I wish you a Merry Christmas, and also maybe a Happy New Year. Enjoy the wine and a mince pie. Goodbye. He walks out the room, leaving in an awkward silence. The dramatic press conference could have been the end of his tenure. However, he went on. The results didn't pick up as many had hoped, this despite his admission of using odd motivational language.
Your word is fantastic. Desire. A lot of times I use the word horny to my play.
Van Gaal says it and everybody cheers. I say it and suddenly HR wants to talk to me. It's not fair. At the very least, this period introduced the world to yet another young superstar. Injuries, like I said, had decimated United's attack. Wayne Rooney was out, as were several others. Van Gaal had little choice but to dip into the academy, and on 25 February 2016, in a Europa League tie against Midtjylland, he gave a debut to a lanky 18-year-old striker from the academy, Marcus Rashford. United risked elimination, yet Rashford, fearless and unknown, scored twice on his debut, instantly becoming a local hero. 3 days later, in his Premier League debut against Arsenal, Marcus Rashford. Remember the name. Now you'd think these were the highlights of this game, but there was competition. After seeing what he believed to be a dive by an Arsenal player, he beelines to Mark Dean. Words are exchanged. Dean remains unmoved, and suddenly Van Gaal, to the disbelief of everyone, throws himself to the ground to give Dean a demonstration. Moments like this, even momentarily, made people forget the boredom brigade that was United's football. United ended the season in 5th place, but at the same time, an FA Cup final was reached and won. Even more, it was yet another young star that sealed the deal. Jesse Lingard in extra time. Van Gaal swarmed his staff. He beams as he walks onto the pitch. The fans, jubilant at Wembley, chant his name. But it was hard to shake the feeling that the celebrations were somewhat half-hearted. Half felt that he had earned more time. The other half were all sure of what was to come. Van Gaal proudly declared, "We showed spirit until the end. We have lifted the cup for the fans." It felt like vindication. However, events behind the scenes moved swiftly. Even as the champagne flowed, there were too many leaks to ignore reality. Within 48 hours of the Wembley triumph, Van Gaal was sacked. The timing, of course, left a sour taste for many. Thus concluded the Louis van Gaal era at Manchester United. An era of transition. Quite frankly, a good one at that. It wasn't the fairy tale many had hoped for, but it was far from a failure. Van Gaal's tenure delivered silverware and a return to Europe. Importantly, he left behind a fascinating legacy of players and principles. Several players he brought in or gave opportunities to would go on to define United in subsequent years and become internationally capped. Not all of the recruits were a success, of course, but that's just the way things go. The football wasn't awe-inspiring, but it did make United more defensively sound. They conceded the fewest goals in the league in 2015-16, not an achievement to scoff at. The team he left behind was award-winning and full of potential. We cannot discount that. In later interviews, he admitted that the Manchester United job was the toughest of his career, citing the rapid commercial pressures and the inability to see through his 3-year plan. On a personal note, excitement around Mourinho's arrival was understandably high, but with the gift of hindsight, I think a lot of United fans should look back on the Van Gaal era from a far warmer perspective than one might think. Yes, it had its frustrations, but it also had charm and character. The humorous moments, the shock press conferences, and the feeling that something was being rebuilt. So this right here is an ode to a very interesting period in the history of Manchester United Football Club. An ode to Louis van Gaal's Red Army.